Right hand, let's say, so help me God.
So help me God.
Jacob Gedleyihlekisa Zuma, the President of the Republic of South Africa.
We will undertake the largest program of public investment in infrastructure in this country's history.
I come to South Africa excited to be investing here.
Ajay Gupta was quite a sharp guy. So he worked out what state policy was, looking where's the big public money, how do we get into that?
Are the Guptas influencing you in running the government?
No, they are not influencing me.
As journalists, we started digging more and more into why are the Guptas behaving the way that they are behaving? What were the politicians exactly linked to?
Every single move appeared to be designed to facilitate extraction.
We're talking about, millions, if not billions, flowing out to the Guptas.
I was approached by a person in possession.
All right, so make 2020 the year of the orange overalls. This is a call by civil society led by the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, agitating for a decisive action against those who committed crimes related to state capture. About 30 civil society formations gathered at the St. George's Cathedral in Cape Town, voicing their frustration at the lack of convictions, despite the view that there is enough evidence already heard by the Zondo Commission. The gathering was inspired by Archbishop Thabo Makgoba's Christmas sermon, where he said, "Make 2020 the year of the orange overalls." The meeting took place on the eve of the State of the Nation address, and First Deputy General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, Solly Mapaila, joins us from our Sea Point studios. And here in our Auckland Park studio, we've got senior researcher at the University of Stellenbosch, Robyn Foley. Robyn, good to see you. Thanks for being with us here in studio. And Solly, always great having you. Thanks very much for being with us in our Cape Town studios.
Thank you very much, Liam.
Solly, let me begin with you before we get a little bit deeper into this conversation. Your reaction to last night's sonar?
The sonar was good, comprehensive, responding to many challenges facing South Africa, particularly unemployment, especially affecting young people. Almost 50% of them who are out of school and out of training are not working. There was also announcement of a comprehensive industrial plans in different sectors of our economy. We hope that those particular areas that focus on production will be able to take out our economy out of a contractionary mode that it has been for quite some time. At the same time, we've also heard good stories about the development of a new city. The city itself will not only create a safe space for people to stay, but will also create jobs and new skills for our country, which we quite welcome. There's been attention to most urgent areas of our needs, for instance, for our students at universities and TVET colleges who are not having appropriate accommodation, and government has made commitments together from the plans that the President presented with the private sector that they will be rolling out massive infrastructure development program. That is quite encouraging. And of course, there are different other areas. The establishment of the National Sovereign Wealth Fund, that is very important because all of us can share in that particular fund for development and to intervene in many areas of need of our society.
All right, Solly, thanks so much for giving us your views on that. But let's get to the discussion on hand now. Now, I imagine, Robyn, you also watched on to see how the State of the Nation went last night. You may or may not have. But, in terms of what we heard the day before, the year of the orange overall and wanting decisive action when it comes to corruption and state capture, did we hear anything last night that affirmed that there is something being done?
I think we heard a lot about the steps that have been taken and the work that's been done in terms of the NPA, but I think the reality is that those that have abused their power, that have manipulated government processes in order to loot the state, have not been held to account. There has been no one placed in jail or any serious repercussions for any of those that have got political power and abused that power. And I think effectively the call from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation and from the rest of the civil society organizations that were present at the rally is to ask the executive to do its job, and to do it with purpose, and primarily the purpose that it has been established for. So all of the institutions, we can appreciate that in terms of the criminal justice system, there was years of neglect and complete avoidance in terms of the criminal activities that were taking place. But it's now time to actually show that those in power will be held to accountable.
Yeah. I mean, Sally, if we take into account just the talk of job losses in every direction that we look at, if we see the state of state-owned enterprises, and we can see the repercussions of what has happened to the country if it is not managed properly, does it not concern you as the SACP and working closely with people on the ground and unions and workers that nobody's been held to account as yet? How do you feel about this?
This is disconcerting, Leanne, because we have known many people who have highlighted the matters of corruption, we have campaigned over it, and some of our comrades have died in the frontline campaigns against corruption and state capture, and we really feel that action needs to be taken against those involved so that authority is able to account, and even those at various levels, they know that if they do wrong and they loot the state resources, even if they do what we characterize as legalized corruption, where they pass all they tick all the dots in terms of some so-called compliance, but only to find that this compliance that is meant to steal from the public purse, all of those must be held accountable. That is why we feel that we cannot wait any longer. We have been engaging with civil society organizations to say maybe it's time that we ourselves take initiatives to take certain matters to court, particularly where there's enough prima facie evidence that's available. And we cannot wait, for instance, even for the Zondo Commission to completely present its report and then say that's only then that we act. We do know that a lot of evidence could be destroyed in the meantime. So whatever is gathered now and there's ability to take that to court, we should be able to do so, because as long as no one in leadership across the spheres of government, even in the private sector that collude with the leaders in government, as long as none of them are taken to jail and wear this orange overall, it will not send a good message that corruption is not good for our country. People will continue to enrich themselves out of looting from the public purse.
Yeah. I mean, what we saw on the red carpet last night, is that good for the country? You know, we know that people are waking up. I mean, somebody put a very heartbreaking comparison of a photograph, and it's a photograph that's gone viral of young school kids crossing a river. They're on their way to school, they're carrying their books over their head, and they've, you know, had to take off their shoes, and they're walking through this river trying to get to school. And juxtaposed next to that is a picture of our politicians walking the red carpet, wearing expensive dresses, going out, smiling, happy, acting like nothing's wrong. But there is a lot wrong. How does it make you feel? This is what you have actually written your thesis into, is looking at state capture, particularly focus on SASA. What you saw last night, is that a true reflection of where we are as a country?
I think it's a true reflection in terms of highlighting just the state of denial that we are in. So, to be quite honest, it was maddening and infuriating. I think the political class at the moment is in a deep sense of denial in terms of what the actual extent of the state capture project has actually been, in terms of how it has impacted the people of this country and robbed the citizens of this country from potential futures.
Yeah.
Effectively. The President highlighted that SAA is just one sort of primary example, but we've looked at all of the sort of 28 major investigations. We've identified 50 fundamental cases or case studies of state capture, and it's involving hundreds of people and organizations, and so far no one has actually taken ownership of correcting all of these gaps.
The research that you've done, could these go to court? Should they go to a court of law right now? As Solly said a bit earlier, we can't wait for the state capture to end, the commission to end and the recommendations, and then we only go forward and do. Is there enough evidence right now for civil society, whoever it is, to take action and say, here's the evidence, we're taking this to court now?
I think there's two sides. So the one is that when the NPA takes a case to court, we appreciate that they need to have a rock solid foundation. They need to minimize any potential risk there is in terms of trials being thrown out of court or any sort of major delays, the Stalingrad tactics that we've seen so often being successfully deployed. But there are cases that I think can go to court. I'd say though, however, we need to move beyond that in terms of holding people to account. When we're looking at like the regulatory bodies, what are they doing in terms of holding those individuals, removing their CA certification? What is the Law Society doing in terms of the lawyers that have been involved? What are we doing within our civil society functions? So Dudu Myeni, the current trial that's been undertaken by OUTA in terms of declaring her a delinquent director, I think that is one example of the types of initiatives that we can take, like Solly has indicated.
Yeah. So, Solly, I mean, I'll bring you in here because, I mean, you mentioned it. You're saying that, you know, as an example, this is what we should be doing. So we see the likes of Dudu Myeni and OUTA going at it there. What are the low-lying fruits? What are the other issues and state capture evidence that we have that we should be going for right now? You say we shouldn't wait for State Capture Commission to end. What should we be doing right now?
Yeah, the most important thing is to put the cases to court. For instance, if you remember the case that were taken to court regarding the Estina dairy farm, where poor people were swindled out of their resources, their livelihoods, their animal stock, for a project that dismally failed, but we later learned that it was because of state capture program and the Guptas fleecing those people of their resources. So it's a simple case that the people who were involved, particularly in the agricultural department in the Free State, can be held to account. At the moment, this matter tried to go to court, but was quite not handled properly. And it has gone through other investigation, whether it's the public protector's office. But we think that it is such kind of a case that is so obvious, where the poor have been robbed. We've got cases, for instance, the VBS, pensioners' money swindled out, even by municipalities and by individuals who lived fleshy lifestyles. And those poor people, all their life savings have been taken. Some actually died of depression, some committed suicide, and their families continue to suffer. So these are basic cases. And on the one hand, other people have been killed as a consequence of this. So the network has been quite strong, but it's a network that can be weakened by simply taking these matters to court. And our comrades, particularly in Limpopo, have been campaigning for those who are involved in the VBS saga to be taken to court and to be prosecuted.
Yeah. I mean, Solly, you were there, I imagine, last night, seeing all of this. And the reality is that in a convoluted state of things right now, some of these people that have been implicated in state capture are still in positions of government. They're still MPs. They're still at SOEs. They're still calling the shots. And we're trying to investigate what went wrong. And yet they're still in these positions of power. How can this be allowed?
Well, that's a double a challenge, because firstly, it's an organizational crisis wherein the organization has lost its moral high ground, and it needs to rectify that internally. For instance, to allow some of the leaders holding certain positions having been implicated in open problems of wrongdoing. On the one hand is the whole process of the due process of the law that takes quite long. For instance, people being regarded as innocent until proven guilty. That process, it's quite strenuous, and we have seen the frustration that has gone into that space. But we've also picked up that part of the frustrations is the security system, both the NPA, the police, as well as the state security agency, because all of these were a group of people who were involved in subverting the law and stealing from the public purse. So the process requires diligence in the investigation, and if you don't do it well, we will lose important cases of prima facie evidence, for instance, going without a prosecution. I mean, some of the people that were involved in the VBS saga, they still stand proudly in public and talk to the people as if they are holier than thou. But we do know, and the people know, they benefited from this, and some things just go on as if nothing has happened. So that is why taking the first case and the second case becomes very important. And if we do that successfully, we will really begin to roll back corruption and state capture in our country.
Robyn, let me come to you again. And I mean, it's always been spoken about how much state capture has actually cost us. And I mean, I don't know if there's ever been an official amount that's come through, because as we hear, there's so much at play here. But from your studies, you've looked into SASA, you've looked into, you can tell us a bit more. But I mean, through calculations and through investigations, what do you think we're looking at?
Leanne, I don't think it is correct to actually be asking how much it's cost us, because that amount is actually incalculable. At the end of the day, we are talking about people's lives that have changed. That have been effectively destroyed. We are talking people that have died because of this project. When we're looking at the institutions, we've had 9 years of hollowing out, of removing institutional capacity. That's 9 years of potential development of the government that is completely gone. So we're playing both catch up, and we're trying to jump over the fence.
Yeah.
And that's effectively what we're looking at. Generations to come will have to still pay for what has taken place in terms of the eroding of our democratic social compact. I think one of the biggest sort of challenges is that we think of it just as corruption and just in terms of monetary, from a monetary perspective, but it has to do with how we live our lives and the choices that we make and how that affects us as a society. So there's a lot of different ways in which the state capture project has impacted society, and I think we mustn't be naive and assume that it is over.
Yeah.
These power dynamics and the abuse of power is an ongoing challenge to any democratic system anywhere in the world, and it is something that we need to keep reminding and reflecting upon as a society if we want to progress and achieve our democratic goals that are enshrined in the Constitution.
We're going to have to leave it there, but I think some great views put forward here with regard to what's going on. Is enough happening behind the scenes with state capture? So joining us was First Deputy General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, Solly Mapaila. Thanks very, very much, Solly. Just one final question as I let you go. You still support President Ramaphosa. You always have. You've been behind him. Are you still behind him? Do you think that he's strong enough to lead this country through the repercussions of state capture?
Yes, we still support the president to lead the project of turnaround, as well as to fight corruption, but also to lead our government cleanly. And we believe that without the support of all South Africans, these challenges that we face as South Africans, we will not be able to overcome them. And also it's important to appreciate that we cannot rely on a single individual to change the lives of our people. All of us must work in our different corners to contribute to the same objective, to make sure that we can have a truly democratic, united and prosperous and peaceful South Africa.
All right. Solly, thanks very, very much, Robyn. Thank you very much as well for being our guest here on the program and talking to us of Make 2020 the Year of the Orange Overalls. Was a call from civil society led by the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. And was that addressed adequately last night? All right. It's gone 7 o'clock. Let's continue our discussion on the news, and also that's our lead story, Sona.